Can you tell me a story?
Sure. Once upon a time, a mom needed a new car.
Was she brave?
She was tired, mostly. But she went to Carvana.com and found a great car at a great price. No secret treasure map required.
Did she have to fight a dragon?
Nope, she bought it 100% online. From her bed, actually.
Was it scary?
Honey, it was as unscary as car buying could be.
Did the car have a sunroof?
It did, actually.
Okay, good story.
Car buying you'll want to tell stories about. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. You know what? It's been too long since we've talked hockey. Utah Mammoth out of the playoffs. We've kind of slipped back into NBA mode, but hey, let's talk a little hockey with Travis Yost from TSN. Kind enough to hang out with us. Travis, how you doing?
Yeah, you got me?
Okay, there we go. Now I got you. Hey, just how much fun have you had during these playoffs? Is this, for those of us that maybe not necessarily been dialed into NHL playoffs until over the last couple of years, now that the Mammoth here in Salt Lake City, how does this rank with some of the other playoffs you've seen in the past?
It's pretty darn good. I've been following the sport my whole life, and I give it a solid A- so far. And I think the great thing is you've still got the two consensus favorites in Carolina in the East and Colorado out West in the Final Four, both with, let's say, slightly more difficult matchups in the conference finals here against Montreal and Vegas, respectively. But, hockey is a sport, you love the parity. The upsets are not infrequent, and that's what draws people to the sport. But there's also like an element where, as a purist, you do want best on best when it matters most. And frankly speaking, I think you could have made the argument, Carolina and Colorado speak for themselves. Montreal and Buffalo, there was zero daylight between those two teams. An incredible Game 7 in overtime last night. Last night, by the way, side note, one of the greatest random sport nights in a long time between the double overtime game with the Spurs and then the overtime game between Buffalo and Montreal, basically side by side. So it's been a great tournament so far, and I think we've got two great matchups here in the conference finals.
Speaking of those two teams, Carolina obviously has had no trouble thus far in the playoffs, and you mentioned it last night. The Canadians win a big game to move on. What is historically, the rest versus rust look like in the NHL playoffs?
Yeah, so it typically skews a little bit towards you want the rest. But it's not as clean and simple as that. There are many, for every 1.5 examples you find of a team with rest obliterating their opponent, you will find an example of an upset the other way. So it's not as loudly directional as you would think. But I do think the real important story here is this is not just a rest advantage. Carolina has basically not played hockey in the last month. I mean, people have fixated on they've got this 12-day layoff for people who haven't been watching the Eastern Conference, Carolina swept Ottawa in the first round, then swept Philadelphia in the second round, and they will wait 12 days from Game 4 of the second round to Game 1 against Montreal, which is as long of a layoff in the modern NHL playoff format as I can ever recall. But it's actually deeper than that, because once you bring the Ottawa series into the fold, Carolina has only played 5 games in the last 26 days. Which is like,
wow.
It's insane. It's like the off season.
I've been doing hockey analytics and stats stuff for 19 years now at this point. That's on the short list of things that I can never recall happening. And I got to imagine that there has been an occasionally super aggressive, very difficult practice from Rod Brindamore and that team, because how else do you keep – I mean, this is like the reverse training camp. You're like basically easing out of the season, but in the same breath, you're in the conference final. Meanwhile, Montreal just went through a gauntlet, including a 7-game series that went to overtime where there was zero daylight between them and Buffalo. So you don't just have a team that is like overly rested. You also have a very fatigued Montreal team coming in. But one thing about the Canadiens roster is they skew very young, and if there's one thing that can combat, fatigue, it's youthful legs, and the Canadiens have them all around the lineup.
So, when you look at, early in the playoffs, I was looking at this and I was thinking, can Carolina hang with Colorado in a 7-game series? Now, as the longer it goes on, the more I'm thinking, I think they can. Now, I would still take Colorado in a 7-game series, but again, just projecting a little bit, if those two do meet up for it all, how do you think that plays out?
Well, first off, I think your guidance and your read of it is completely in line with the odds makers, which is always a good sign. But I'll go one step further. If you price a Stanley Cup matchup right now, Carolina-Colorado, Carolina would be the shortest underdog of any team in the league in that matchup against Colorado. They'd probably price, I think I saw markets were pricing Colorado at like 56, 57% implied probability to win that series, which is pretty significant when it comes to odds, but relative to who they could be playing, they might be a 2-1, 2.5-1 favorite against Montreal if it goes that way. So the interesting dynamic in that potential matchup, and frankly, like, no disrespect to Montreal, who's really exciting and fun to watch, especially at the top of the lineup. And I speak about the Vegas Golden Knights with insane reverence. I wrote in my article today, they sleepwalk to the second or third round of the playoffs every year at this point. It's almost boring at this point how good they are when it comes to April and May. But if you do get a Carolina-Colorado, the interesting matchup there is Colorado is known for two things. They play with an honestly unbelievable pace of play. And if you haven't watched an Avalanche game yet, I really encourage you. Just watch it, period, and soak it in. I mean, the way they move the puck and get north-south, it really is unparalleled with one exception, and that is the Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina plays the exact same way stylistically. They are up and down the ice. They've got furbished skaters all around the lineup. And on top of that, where Colorado is extremely strong, I mean, it seems like they can score a goal in every other shift. Carolina is about as robust a defensive team as you will find. In the last 5 years, they are number one in expected goals against, number two by a rounding error in real goals against. So, if nothing else, Carolina is going to be a daunting defensive opponent to this Colorado team. For as good as Colorado is and how deadly their offense is, Carolina can bog down any team in the league, and Avalanche included in that group. I think the question there for Carolina is, okay, you can slow Colorado down, but where does your scoring come against Colorado, where their goaltending tandem just won the Jennings Trophy for best team save percentage? So really, now that I'm talking through it, you got me drooling at the match. And now Montreal and Vegas will both win game one on the road, and you'll have me on next week talking about Montreal-Vegas. So who knows here?
Well, on the Vegas Colorado that gets started tonight. What is your expectation? It seems as though it's similar to a similar type of matchup with the Mammoth wanting to get out in transition. Vegas obviously very, very strong and physical. Can that physicality chip away at Colorado? Is Colorado just too elusive?
I think it can. And by the way, I think the biggest wild card of the four teams, like with no reservation whatsoever, are the Vegas Golden Knights. I mentioned that this team sleepwalks to the playoffs every year because they do. They are a very talented team. This has been the regular season for the Golden Knights was about as trying and disappointing as a season they've really had as an expansion team. They looked slow at times, which is very uncommon for them, and the goaltending was a complete nightmare. And people forget they fired their coach with 3 weeks left in the season. With 3 weeks left in the season, they fired their head coach, bring in John Tortorella. They play a tomato can schedule to finish the regular season and dominate. They play a live Utah team in the first round. And I came on here a few weeks ago when we were talking the Utah-Vegas series, and I thought whoever won that matchup was going to win the Pacific and get into the third round against likely Colorado. Vegas dispatches Utah in a really good six-game series. They make light work of Anaheim in the second round. And now there's an interesting question of like, okay, did Vegas find their game, new coach, new voice in the room? How much do you put weight into the recent results where Vegas just looks much better stylistically? Their back forechecking nightmare. They completely paralyzed the Ducks in that second round. Like in years past, you would assume Vegas is a very live underdog against Colorado. And by the way, rosters change a lot in the NHL, but it was 5 years ago that a similarly veteran Vegas team dispatched a similarly veteran Colorado team in 6 games in the second round, with a lot of the core players still remaining on both sides of the aisle. So could Vegas win this series? Yes. And by the way, Vegas has one of the toughest teams to beat when they're on home ice that exists in the NHL. But, in a lot of scenarios, I could have talked myself into, I think Vegas has found their groove, and I think they can pull off an upset. And if it was Vegas-Carolina, I think would be considering an upset a little bit more. I do think Colorado just has too much firepower further on down the lineup. But I think, my conference final preview, I had both series going 6 games and given deference to the favorites here in Carolina and Colorado. But I would say unequivocally Vegas is the biggest wild card of the 4 teams. I mean, we could see Vegas look a lot like they did in February and March, and Colorado wins that series in 5 games. Or we can see this team that'll forecheck you into oblivion like they did against Utah and Anaheim, and that series could go the distance.
Well, you talk about Utah, and there's a reason why I think we haven't talked a lot of hockey since Utah got dispatched, because it was a little painful. I mean, Utah was in Vegas, and they were 52 seconds away from taking a 3-2 advantage back to Salt Lake City. Instead, they give up that late goal, lose in overtime, and then get blitzed in game number 6. So, when you look at where Utah is in compared to Vegas, and for the most part, that was a very closely played series. How far along do you think Utah is before they're in the mix here when you talk about the Final Four of the NHL?
I think they're very close. Let's talk about a few different things. Number one, this very talented roster, which was one of the better teams in the entire league at 5-on-5, which is the single most important indicator of future performance. This Mammoth team has the exact right mix, especially, a little more seasoned and veteran on the blue line. All of those guys returning next year, by the way, with a really nice dash and sprinkle of young scoring talent. Dylan Guenther, Logan Cooley. I mean, I can make the argument all day long, despite a couple of really dumb penalties. I thought Logan Cooley was the best player on either team in that first round series against Vegas. And quite frankly, I thought they basically played to break even. I thought Utah and Vegas were indiscernible from one another. I thought Vegas's forecheck and defensive play was a little bit stronger. I thought Utah clearly scared them when they were on the attack, because the Mammoth were so good all year in transition and on rush opportunities. There is so much to like about this roster. They've got nearly $15 million in cap space going into the offseason, and they do have to get a backup goalie in all likelihood. It should come relatively cheap. They got to make a couple of investments, but there is an opportunity, should they choose, to add significantly this summer. And I think the really interesting question, I think, here, and maybe the number one question for the Mammoth, is how much more will development of these younger players, and when I say younger, I'm talking 23 and unders. Clayton Keller, even though we can call him young, he's a known commodity, right? He's established. We know what we're getting from him. But a guy like Guenther, some of these prospects that we expect to come up over the next year or two, how much more can we really tap into that? And does that become a differentiating factor next year? Or do we even need to add further to this lineup? And I think, by the way, and the reason I'm bringing this up is if they say, hey, look, we want to reload and add one more time, we've got a stable of young picks and young prospects and developed NHL players that we could package together in a big trade. Like, I think Utah, San Jose, maybe 1A, 1B in terms of teams that could really acquire a big fish this summer if they so choose. I think San Jose maybe has a little bit more urgency because they're a little thinner in the talent department. This Utah roster is very good, and I'm not, again, I picked them to beat Vegas in 7 games in the first round. That's how well I thought of this team, and I think they would have beaten Anaheim and Edmonton as well. So I think they got the toughest. I think they got the toughest of the matchups, unfortunately for Utah, and that's just kind of the reality of being the crossover team and the way the math shaked out. But I think the fascinating question is, do we keep our powder dry maybe towards the trade deadline and really add at the margins this summer? Free agency is very thin on talent. Or do we look this summer to make a big splash, to make a big trade? And if they do choose that path, I think they're on a very short list of teams who could create some of the most interesting compensation packages for potential sellers.
So you mentioned the $15-16 million in cap space. We're used to NBA numbers where that doesn't really get you much. But in the NHL world, how much flexibility does that give you?
Mom, can you tell me a story?
Sure. Once upon a time, a mom needed a new car.
Was she brave?
She was tired, mostly. But she went to Carvana.com and found a great car at a great price. No secret treasure map required.
Did she have to fight a dragon?
Nope. She bought it 100% online. From her bed, actually.
Was it scary?
Honey, it was as unscary as car buying could be.
Did the car have a sunroof?
It did, actually.
Okay, good story.
Car buying you'll want to tell stories about. Buy your car today on
Carvana.
Delivery fees may apply.
That's quite a bit. I mean, the salary cap is in the 107, 108. The cap ceiling next year, and Utah will be well above the cap floor. So their roster, they could just completely run it back. But, and let's say a marquee player who's not on his entry-level contract. So I'm not talking about acquiring a 21-year-old who's a top 10 player in the league who's making $800,000 because you are going to pay a king's ransom for that type player. What I'm talking about, let's just say hypothetically, you have a team in Toronto that's like, hey, look, we actually, now that we landed the number 1 overall pick and we're going to Gavin McKenna, like maybe, and by the way, we're off the worst year of Austin Matthews' career, maybe he is a guy we can move on from. We just moved on from Mitch Marner for nothing, and we don't want to make that same mistake twice. If a player like Austin Matthews becomes available and his name is very loudly available in the media, how the Maple Leafs' new brain trust is thinking about that, we have no idea. Those are the type of guys, though, that are, they're 10, 11, 12, $13 million against an annual cap hit. So it's a significant addition. But when I say Utah's got $14 million, let's call it $13 million after they spend on the goalie, the backup goalie. Like, you can pretty much add a top-tier, established, high-paid player. The question is, 1, what are you willing to give up? That's always the billion-dollar question. And 2, if you make the big move for a player, let's just say hypothetically like Matthews, your powder is no longer dry anymore. You've pretty much fired all the bullets in the chamber here, and that team – expectations go from, oh, yeah, we were this fun, exciting, up-tempo team that got a wild card berth and put a serious scare into a conference finalist. I think the math and the bar go up, right? It's now we've got a win a round or two in the playoffs, and there should be real expectations on a team like that.
You mentioned Carolina's defense, and Frederick Anderson's numbers have been elite. How much is Carolina's run defensively driven by the goaltending as opposed to, their scheme and their team play?
I think it's more so the defensive play. I mean, Freddie Anderson's on an absolute heater. He's a reliable goalie. We've seen him play many years, but he's about 3 standard deviations above his historical average, which, those things always come back down to earth. But the reason why I give a lot of deference to Carolina and why I think they're such an elite team, if just watch a Hurricanes game, I'll juxtapose it again. You watch a Colorado game, they're flying all over the ice. You watch a Carolina game, the thing you notice is the other team never has the puck. Carolina has the puck, or they're dumping the puck in and they're forechecking you into oblivion. It is teams spend inordinate amounts of time trying to just get possession of the puck, let alone to set up an offense in the offensive third. And that is why Carolina has been so hard to beat. One of the interesting dynamics coming into the series, by the way, they're playing a Montreal team who surprisingly might be the team that has had the most success against Carolina this year. They beat them all 3 games, which is rare to begin with. They outscored them 15-8. Carolina goalies only stopped 75% of the shots, so it was a pretty much goaltending meltdown in those games. How much you want to put into that? I think that's always a subject for debate. But one thing that I took away, the last game they played in mid-March, Montreal, I think they won 3-1. Don't quote me on it. I think it was 3-1. Carolina outshot Montreal. Shot attempts were 100-44 in the game, and that's kind of the point. You never ever see a team with 100 shot attempts in a regulation game. It's unheard of. I mean, you're taking almost a shot and a half a minute. But that is how Carolina plays. They kill you through death by 1,000 paper cuts. It is nonstop volume. They always have possession of the puck, and that is why they're going to be such a difficult opponent for this Montreal team that does have talent, but I think they're going to spend a lot of time defending in this series.
$100,000 fine for Tortorella. That's not chump change, but a second-round pick. That seems like a heavy price, which, by the way, I love. As a member of the media, yeah, absolutely. Ding these guys good. But is there a precedence for this, or is this kind of uncharted territory for the NHL and the media policy?
It's not uncharted. It's pretty uncharted for the media policy, but you know where it's not uncharted? The league does not like being embarrassed, and the league definitely does not like when they have to remind you twice of something. I know this firsthand, by the way. I also know it the same way that you guys do, reading the media. And the one thing I would go back to a few years ago, and this is like an inside baseball random story, but it's a great one. There was a trade that the Vegas Golden Knights, ironically, and the Ottawa Senators were trying to engineer And Ottawa, let's just say, was not exactly forthright about a partial no-trade list for a player at the time of Evgeny Dadonov. And because the league thought it was unbecoming, I mean, it's either reckless or negligent. You take the pick of the two, that they didn't disclose what this player's partial trade list looks like, blah, blah, blah. They slapped a first-round pick penalty on the Ottawa Senators, which was, I mean, you slap a first-round pick on anyone, it doesn't matter the sport. That's going to resonate loudly. And so it's been some time since we've seen a punishment quite like this. But here's what happened. The NHL, I am 100% sure, and they even disclosed this in the PR release, that they had already previously warned Vegas. And by the way, this is the double-edged sword of John Tortorella. Like, the guy is experienced. There are teams, especially veteran teams, that seem to like the cut of his jib. And by the way, I think a veteran team is what Tortorella needs. Like, when he was with the Flyers a year or 2 years ago, like, he doesn't have the patience for 21-year-olds making mistakes, and they don't have the patience for him. They need to be managed differently. It's like oil and water. The Vegas Golden Knights really were a perfect roster for a veteran coach, a veteran team to kind of coexist. But the guy holds grudges. I mean, this is not his 10th run-in with the media. He's very famous blow-ups with Larry Brooks in New York in the past when he was with the Rangers. Clearly, the NHL pulled Vegas into a room and said, don't do this again. Vegas did exactly that. Tortorella wasn't out on the handshake line. He didn't do the media. And the reports are, whether you believe it or not, TBD, but the reports were that Vegas was upset that the league suspended Braden McNabb an extra game for a penalty that he actually had a major on in the game. Vegas was upset about that, so the league took that as, hey, you're showtiming us. Here you go. Here's a second-round pick. I do expect that the league may walk that down because they were pretty transparent that they are calling the Golden Knights brass to New York City, which I assume is going to be we're gonna make you sweat in this room for an hour and a half, and you're going to hear what we say one last time. I do think their likely outcome is they walk that second round pick penalty down. But I do think some sort of penalty is going to stick beyond the $100,000 fine. And that, again, that's the trade-off you're making when you're hiring a guy like Tortorella. And I got to be honest, like, if I'm the Vegas Golden Knights, like, yes, he got me to the conference final. You cannot understate how important that is. But losing a second-round pick is a big deal, and I'm sure there were some tough conversations in Vegas as well.
So Vegas seems like the kind of organization where if you make eye contact with somebody in a hallway, you're going to get fired for it. So is this in hindsight, outside of the fine and the second-round pick, just the way that this team responded, was this the right move to make that coaching change?
It's the easy answer is to say yes. Let me say it. Let me answer two different ways. The first way is I do think it was the right time. As crazy as it was late in the season, Vegas was playing horribly. They were no longer responding to Cassidy. I think the termination, although very, very surprising, especially considering Cassidy's track record and Vegas's track record, the Golden Knights, and I give them more credit for this than I think most people. They don't care how long you've been with the team. They don't care anything whatsoever. It's what have you done for me lately? And I quite frankly think organizations that run like that, net tend to do better. But there's a line between aggressive management and like bloodlust, and Vegas takes it to the extreme. I do think there is still a very open question if Tortorella is the right fit for this team. It's very hard to say that now because the team's winning under him, and clearly the roster is responding to him. He's got their best players going, including Mitch Marner, who's leading the playoffs in scoring. And if you know anything about Mitch Marner, you know him leading the playoffs in scoring is a pretty big deal. So I think Tortorella deserves a lot of credit. But in terms of a fit, like, is Tortorella the coach of Vegas next year if they lose in 5 or 6 to Colorado? I think that's a very much open question. I don't think that they see beating Utah, Anaheim, and 2 weeks of slapping around Calgary and Vancouver at the end of the regular season in and of itself justifies him keeping his job beyond this year. So could Vegas, say, hey, thanks for stepping in, Torts, but we're actually going to look into a new coaching hire around the market this summer if and when they're eliminated? I think that's very possible if they lose to Colorado. If they get to a Stanley Cup with Tortorella, though, I think the odds of him staying increase.
Travis, great conversation, man. We appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let's do it again soon.
Anytime, but we could do the Montreal-Vegas preview for the Stanley Cup in 2 weeks.
I like it.
We'll all laugh about how wrong we were. I was.
Thanks, Travis.
Take care,
Awesome. Travis Yost from TSN right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Ready or not, summer is coming, and Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance is on now. Right now through May 25th, get up to 70% off everything home at Wayfair. Plus, score amazing doorbuster deals all sale long and surprise flash deals on Memorial Day. We're talking thousands of products at every style and budget. Now is the time to save big on must-haves for your patio, backyard, and beyond. These savings won't last, so don't wait. Shop Wayfair's Memorial Day clearance now through May 25th.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Summer is all about freedom, fun, and growing up. And between the ages of 9 and 13, kids are starting to form their views about alcohol. With more independence, their still developing brains need more guidance and support than ever. That's why summer is the perfect time to stay connected and plan fun, safe family activities together. Research shows kids who spend quality time with their parents doing what they enjoy are less likely to drink underage. And when kids feel close to you, they're more likely to listen, especially when you set clear expectations. In fact, kids who drink before 15 are far more likely to struggle with alcohol later. This summer, create a no-bummer summer with fun, alcohol-free activities for your kids. Go to summer.parentsempowered.org to take a quick quiz and discover ideas tailored to your family. A little time together can make a big difference. For more information and to learn more about how to prevent underage drinking, visit parentsempowered.org.